Hey, and welcome to Perceptual. We're taking the dog for a walk today, and I just thought I'd give a quick update. My name is Chris. This is Perceptual, where we talk about, key mental models that you have, how you manage your life and predict the world. And I'm 54, and at this stage, you're really more about, rather than seeing yourself succeed, is seeing others succeed and others do well. And so I share ideas around photography. I've had 20 years in fintech, lived and worked overseas, periods of time. I've raised a family, 16 and 18-year-olds, so they're in their teenage years. Got the dogs, the cats, the house, investments. I've done well, no multi-millionaire, but I've done adequately, to generate, income to support the lifestyle. And I've taken last year off to really reconsider about what I'm about, learn new skills, relearn how to learn how to communicate, learn how to write, learn how to express, learn how to distill, what's happening in the world and what I know and from my experiences down to core ideas that I can share. Some of those with you today. Yeah. So the first idea I want to share with you is really the idea. This came out of I Hate Myself, the book, which I'll link. But the idea that it presents is that you weren't born hating yourself. Self-hatred is a learned system. It is not your identity. And the reason that I'm interested in this topic is that I've experienced that, very much past it now. But what I'm really wanting to distill what happened and the impact of it and how I got free of it, because it's a real thing. And I can remember the level of suffering that I've experienced because of it. Now, this is nothing new. People, have always talked about suffering and how to live a good life and all that sort of thing. But I don't think you can appreciate, unless you're the person that I'm hoping that is watching this, is I really understand the level of suffering involved in this. And this book, although it doesn't specifically describe the methods to get out, and I've done a lot of videos on that, which I think Team CBT is the best structure on how to deal and understand what you're feeling and thinking. And so I've done a lot of videos on that. I talk a lot about that because I think it's the best model. I think it's the benchmark of what therapeutic professionals should have. So I think it's fantastic. I don't get any kickbacks because of that. It just works. So I think because they've solved a core element out of it, and that is, resistance, outcome resistance and process resistance, which I've talked to in previous videos. So why this video then? Well, I've read this book, and I forget the author, which I'll link to, is that it's so powerful because what it does is that it addresses the central idea of you hating yourself. Now, maybe this is a defect schema. Maybe David Burns would call it a self-defeating belief. But I think what it addresses and what it talks about and how it explains is that it's not just like a loss of self-esteem, or it's not just a symptom of something. It is a fundamental belief that you are somehow defective. You are somehow damaged. You are somehow it's the system. It's if you're a fish in water and you don't recognize the water because you're swinging it every day, it is that. It is the structure of your reality. And I can't emphasize that enough. That's point number one, right? So that's what it's like to live in it. And let me explain a little bit more. It's the second feature, I think, in the book, where it talks about people's experiences, where you think about where you try to identify where this started, and the classic things, the blame your parents, blame society, blame. No, so I'm not here to talk about that. And I've had probably a lot of experiences like that. But when I think about it, I can't put my finger on it, where it went before and after. It feels like it was always there. And that is the second defining characteristic of this. It's of this belief where you can't say that it was this or that. It was just always present. And so when you're looking through and you're going through the memories, and you could go, yeah, that bit of that, but it just always seemed to be there. And then when people describe it, that sense of, of this self, it's just there. Now we could argue how it got there. We could argue that, you were taught later, whatever it is. The key thing here is that it wasn't, you're not born with it. I think it's a big claim. You're not born with it. I'm going to grant that. If that is true, then you had to have learnt it. And this builds an incredible sense of hope because you didn't come with it. You learnt it. It's possible to unlearn it, right? which I believe. I believe those statements to all be true. You're not born with it. How could you be? You learnt it somehow, whether that's yourself, ways of thinking, you might have tendencies, might be experiences, nature, nurture, but you learnt it. There was a process to get there, which means that again, you can unlearn it, and which means it's not a given. And this is critical, right? So there's no baby that is born defective, right? This belief is established early, and so early before experiences that you interpret experiences, through this lens. So I think that is just so important. Key point number 2. It feels like reality because it becomes reality, right? Let me say it again. It feels like it because it becomes it. Everyone's seen the movie The Matrix. You're born into this belief system. I say born into it. You are living in with this structure. It's not a thought. It's a background program, right? Key point number 3. You can't outthink a system, right? You can't outthink this. You can't outthink something that thinks it's you, because it's a layer, it's a platform, it's a base layer that all of your other reasoning sits on, right? This is important. If your fundamental structure of reality is that somehow you are damaged, you are no good, that something is wrong with you, and that you hate yourself, right? That's the base layer. That's the base layer. And everything else on top of it operates with that background and operating assumption, right? I can't emphasize that enough. Everything else follows, and you're wrestling it. No, you're fighting it. You're fighting yourself. You're trying to prove against it. You're defensive against it, and it's a defensive stance, and it's a given, right? So that is core. And I think key point number 4 is that the shift is really challenging that authority, right? It's not the content of it, right? It's challenging the fundamental structure of it. This is like a canopicus, that we're not the center of the universe, right? That we're rotating around something else, things rotating around the world. This is the moment where, in the movie Fight Club, where you realize that, holy shit, it's backwards. Or I see dead people in, The Sixth Sense, where as you look back on it, or The Matrix again, which is another one, is that this idea, this thorn, that the base layer is not true. There's something not right with this picture. That's it, right? So you're not broken. And the system of thinking, the structure, the reality that you're born into, the assumption that something's wrong with you. The level of self-hatred is just a given. And I think what really cracks this is the author talks about having to separate that. It's very hard to talk around. You have to come to the fundamentals where you have to separate that belief. I'd call it a belief, a structure, an assumption, a base layer from yourself. It's not you. It is not you. And it's such an important distinction. He talks about it's hard to break unless you can see that, unless you can get to that, right? And I believe that. So I think, just in summary, you weren't born like it, right? We're not born hating ourselves. So at some point we've gathered that, right? 2 is that it's the base layer. 3 is that, and it's not the content, right? So you can't talk yourself out of it if the background assumption is always loaded. And I lived like this for so long, and it was true. It was just true. And I remember I'd be writing down my thoughts, like journaling, or some people say journaling helps. It didn't really help me. It just sort of reinforced that, because I never got to the underlying narratives. And this is why I've written Annalie, that you can spit out your shitty day. That's content, and it will identify your base layers, your assumptions. So what are your values? What are the thoughts behind? What are you feeling? It's not just the content. And we'll get later as I build this up to identify the self-defeating beliefs. But I think what this book changed for me is just how central that self-hate is, and how long. And you could sit around and talk about trauma that caused those things. But when I really looked into it, and the common experience is that it was always there. Gets rid of all the, and if anything, you're looking for evidence to support that. So it really turns the model upside down, that things happen to me, so therefore I feel that way, versus that construction was added and then everything else is interpreted through it. That's the point here. That's the point that I'm making, is that you're looking for it. You're looking for it. You're proving, you're evidencing it, because it's the fundamental assumption. And Ne- it was said to Neo's like, Neo said, what are you trying to tell me, that I can dodge bullets? And Morpheus says to Neo, says, when you're ready, you won't need to. And the analogy there is that what he's saying is that I'll always be confident, or that I'll be happy, that I'll be all these things that you classically think that you're looking for, and that I won't be sad, that I won't have any worries. And the message here is that you won't need to worry about that, because you can accept and have your emotions, because your emotions are not going to be representative of something is wrong with you, right? You won't have to dodge your emotions, painful bullets, painful emotions. You won't have to dodge them anymore, because you can accept them. And I think what is different here, there's self-defense and self-acceptance. But I think what the classic CBT is missing, or even team CBT, is this idea of acceptance, unconditional self-esteem he talks about, which I think he's right. And this notion of hatred, self-hate. The author in this book talks about what parts of you do you hate, your little finger, and if all the cells are being replaced. He breaks up and forces you to think about what is it of yourself. If you lost all the parts of your body and there was 10% of you left, or you got body replaced by robotics, do you hate the robotics too? It forces you, and he says, if anything, it is more about the thought or the feelings, the thoughts and the feelings, the things that we hate. And I guess my claim, which I agree with the author on, and I think Team CBT provides methods to do it, is that an AI can give you the mechanisms to fast track that and get to those core narratives and assumptions. But if this is the thing, if self-hate is the thing that you're having to battle and deal with, then that's where you start. It's not a symptom. It's a feature of the operating system. And I think that's probably reoriented me. David and Team CBT, all those guys talk about probably a list of self-defeating beliefs. Schemas talk about lots of different schemas and beliefs. I think if this one affects you, and that's where I would start. That's where I would start. And then when you go on that journey, I think then the exercises think about, where did that start? Who were your teachers? When did you start to believe this, And for me, as well as the comments in the book from other people, is that they can't quite remember or put their finger on the specific event. So I think, again, in summary, you weren't born like it. You were taught. Go back and retrace those steps. And is it true for you that you can't quite put your finger on it? Or is it always a feature of the system? That tells me a lot about idea of trauma and blame and all these external. We think it's external events. It's not. And I think this puts the best case forward for that, is that it was there even before the traumatic events, And I think that's a stunning revelation, because I think that suggestion is actually suggesting something else, that it's actually driving the idea that you could have potentially, the base layer was installed, and you could potentially then be interpreting those experiences through this lens. So in terms of the chicken or the egg, this puts the base layer, the installation of the malware, clearly front and center of the problem. And I think that's the revelation. Now, maybe if you've got other self-defeating beliefs, then you start there. But I think the author would claim that this is front and center of a lot of the others, right? And I know that's where I agree with him. That's where I agree with him. Just in final thoughts, I think David Burns talks about treating the person, what's happening there. And I think it might be just this is one self-defeating belief. It could be a defective schema, but there's something else here that operates, and I think he's put his finger on it. That's what I like about it. That's my learnings. That's where I'm at. Let me know what you think. If you've ever experienced self-hatred, got past it, still battling it, or maybe this opened your eyes to something else that you didn't know about yourself. And I hope it's meant to be a story of hope, because I think it's a hopeful story, and there are mechanisms and there are ways out of this. Wishing you well on your journey. Ciao.